He fed two orphan girls a warm meal. 10 years later, a warship descended looking for him. The warship came down through the cloud line at sundown, and the whole valley went dark in its shadow. Cole Hadley was tightening a wire on the south paddock when the daylight changed. Not the slow change of evening, the sudden change of something massive sliding between him and the sun. He looked up and forgot to breathe. It was bigger than the town, bigger than the ridge behind the town. A long blade of dark metal hanging in the sky like the universe had drawn a knife and pointed it down at him. The wire fell out of his hand. Across the dust road, Mary Akuna's pump kicked off. Then her dogs started barking it away. They only barked when something was wrong. Then the wind picked up, the kind of wind warships push down before they touch a planet, and Cole's hat went sideways and he didn't reach for it. The whole sky was pressed down on Beren's reach. He could hear his own heart. He could hear the rivets on the south fence whining. He could hear someone, somewhere in town, screaming. Something inside him, some old surviving part that never closed up after his wife died, told him the same thing it had told him exactly twice before in his life. This is the day everything changes. To understand what he was looking at, you have to go back 10 years, to a quieter evening, to a smaller sky, to the soft, almost forgotten sound of a barn door opening 1 inch at a time, while a man inside was eating a bowl of stew alone and didn't yet know that the universe had just walked onto his property. Beren's reach had 3 good months a year. Cole had been there long enough to know which ones, which order, which smells came with each. The wind off the salt flats in spring was always sweet for about 2 weeks. After that, the dust got in everything, and the sweetness was gone until next year. He'd come out from Earth with Ray the year the colony charter dropped to a single signature. They'd been 26. They'd held hands on the shuttle and laughed at the seriousness of the customs officer. They'd taken a plot the company couldn't sell to anyone else, on the wrong side of the ridge, near a saltwater spring that ran clean if you treated it right. Ray had liked the sound of it. Ray had liked the sound of most things. 3 years later, Ray was buried under a cottonwood her father had sent her as a sapling. Cole was 36 the night the girls came. He didn't know it at the time, but it was the second most important night of his adult life. The first one had been the one he'd lost. He kept the place running, mostly out of habit. 2 milking goats, 6 chickens, a strip of hard wheat that gave him just enough flour, and a black and tan dog named Reno, who'd shown up one autumn and never gone away. He fixed what broke, sold the surplus to a pickup driver named Waddle, who came through every 6 weeks, and for the rest of the time, he was alone with the wind and the sky. He had a rifle by the door. He had a pistol on the kitchen table. He had a careful, slow distrust of strangers that had killed 2 men on the next over property the year before. Men who'd come in friendly and turned mean fast. That night, he was eating stew. He'd shot a wild ground bird that morning, and Ray's old recipe was the only thing he could still cook the way she would have. Onion, salt, a square of dried tomato she'd put up the year before she died, in jars he was now slowly working his way through. He'd told himself he'd go fast on the jars at first. Now he ate from them slowly. Once he was out, that was it. That was the last food he would ever taste that her hands had touched. So he ate slow. That was when Reno's head came up. Cole didn't move at first. Reno did this maybe twice a week. For a coyote, for a hawk's shadow, for nothing at all. But the dog stayed up. His ears stayed up. And then his lip pulled back, just a hair, and Cole put his spoon down. He listened. A creak from the barn, very small. The kind a barn door made when something pushed on it from the inside. Wind didn't push from the inside. Cole stood up. He walked, soft, to the door. He picked up the rifle. He didn't turn the porch light on. The dog moved past him low, nose to ground, the way Reno only moved when he had registered a person and was deciding whether the person was friend. Cole stepped onto the porch. The barn door was open 3 inches. He'd shut it before dinner. The barn at night was a long room of warm shadows and the smell of straw and old machine grease. Cole moved in slow, rifle low, the way Ray's father had taught him to move when something might be in a barn that wasn't supposed to be. Reno paced ahead of him. The dog wasn't growling. That meant something. There was breathing in the corner. It was small breathing. 2 of them. Cole stopped at the second support beam and lowered his voice into the kind of voice you used with a deer that hadn't quite figured out it could run. "You all right back there?" "Nothing. I've got a rifle. I'm not pointing it. I'd rather not. Come on out where I can see you." The breathing stuttered. Then there was a small choke sound that he understood. In the part of him that had once been a son and once been a husband and had never quite been a father was a child trying not to cry. He set the rifle against the beam and stepped a few paces away from it. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'm not going to shoot anybody. Come on out." Movement at the back. Slow. Two figures, low to the ground. They came out from behind the hay roll into the half-light from the doorway, and Cole stopped breathing for the second time in his life. Their skin was purple. Not blue, not lavender, not the kind of ash gray he'd seen on the rare off-worlder who came through the township once or twice a year. This was a deep, even purple, the color of a bruise an hour after a fall, with a soft sheen to it where the lamp from the porch caught the older one's shoulder. Her hair was white. So was the younger one's, long and uncombed and full of straw. The older girl was maybe 12. The younger one looked 5 or 6. Both were thin in a way that made his stomach turn over. The older one was holding the younger one half behind her body, with her arms crossed over the smaller chest like a shield. The younger one was crying and not trying to hide it anymore. The older girl's eyes were violet. They were enormous. They were watching him with an intelligence that was not a child's intelligence. It was the intelligence of something that had been trying to keep someone alive for a long time. She said something. Cole didn't catch it. "I don't know what you said," he told her, soft, not moving. "I'm sorry. I don't speak it." The older girl swallowed. Her throat worked. Then in slow, careful standard, with an accent he couldn't place, she said, "Please, we are hungry." Cole's hand went up to his face. He closed his eyes for a second. He'd been alone 3 years. He had not heard those 2 words said in that order, in that voice, by anyone in 3 years. When he opened his eyes again, the younger one was looking up at him from under her sister's arm, and her violet eyes were swimming with tears, and her mouth was open like she was going to say the word too but couldn't manage it. "All right," Cole said. His voice came out rougher than he meant it. "All right, come on. Come on inside. I've got food." The older girl didn't move. "It's all right," he said again. "I'm not going to call anybody." Something behind her eyes broke. Just a small thing he saw and understood. She nodded once and started forward, and the younger girl reached up and grabbed her sister's hand. Reno walked them in. The kitchen was small. He'd built most of it himself with Ray beside him the year they'd come out, and he'd never quite redone a single piece of it after she was gone. The same brass kettle she'd picked, the same hand-painted plate above the stove with 2 birds on it, the same crooked cabinet she'd laughed at and refused to let him fix. He pulled out 2 plates. He pulled out 2 more, then put 2 back, because he wasn't sure how much they could eat. The girls stood by the doorway. Neither of them sat. Neither of them spoke. Reno was sitting at the younger one's feet, looking up at her, tail flat to the floor, the way the dog did when he had decided a stranger was now his. "Come on," Cole said, ladling the stew. Sit down." The older one looked at the chairs like she didn't know what they were for, and then sat the way someone sat who had not sat at a kitchen table in months. Slow, wrong angle. Both hands flat on the table like she expected someone to take it away. The younger one climbed up beside her without being asked. She kept one hand twisted in the back of the older girl's shirt. Cole set bowls in front of them. He set bread. He filled glasses with water from the tap and watched the older one's eyes go to the water like they were going to a fire. "Drink," he said. She did. The little one tried to grab the glass with both hands. She got water on her chin and didn't notice. She drank it all and held the glass up, and Cole filled it again, and she drank that, and she held it up again, and he filled it a 3rd time, and the older girl said something sharp in their language to slow her down, and Cole said, "It's all right. We've got plenty. The well runs." The older girl looked at him a long time. Then she nodded, very small, and picked up her spoon. He had never watched anyone eat like they ate, It wasn't fast exactly. It was deliberate. It was the eating of someone who had been hungry too long to be a child at a table anymore. The little one's eyes closed at the first bite, actually closed, like she had to shut down everything else in her body for a second to receive it. The older one kept watching Cole the whole time she ate. She held the spoon with all four of her fingers in her thumb, every bite. She didn't waste a drop. When she got down to the bottom of the bowl, she wiped it with bread the way Cole's grandmother used to wipe a plate in Idaho. And Cole had to look out the window for a second so they didn't see his face. He served them again. The little one ate that bowl too. Halfway through, she started to cry. Just quietly, just into the bowl. The older girl said something to her in their language, some soft, low thing, and put a hand on her hair, and the little one nodded and kept eating, the tears going right down her face into the stew. And Cole sat down across from them and held very still, and his own throat closed up, and he did not say anything for a long time. When they were finally done, the older girl set her spoon down very precisely on the side of the bowl, lined up the way you would line up a tool you intended to use again the next morning. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Then she put both hands flat on the table again and looked at Cole and said in that careful standard, "Thank you." Cole nodded. "I'm Cole," he said. She studied him. "Nira," she said finally. She put her hand very lightly on the younger girl's head. "This is Mira." "Mira," he repeated. The little one looked up at the sound of her name. She had stew on her chin. Her eyes were the same violet as her sister's, but lighter, almost lavender. Cole reached for a cloth and held it out to her. Slow, the way you held something out to a small animal. She took it. She wiped her chin and gave the cloth back, like she was returning something borrowed. "Hello," she said. It was the first thing she'd said. Her voice was very small and very clear, and Cole had to put his hand around the back of his neck and look at the ceiling for a second, because he was a man who had buried his wife, and he was not in the habit anymore of having his throat work like this. "Hello, Mira," he said. She smiled. It was not a big smile. It was a tired one, an exhausted one, the smile of a child who had not been told it was safe yet, but who had decided on the basis of a bowl of stew to take a small risk on this large, weather-worn man with a dog at her feet. Cole would remember that smile for 10 years. He would remember it under every shape of sky. He gave them the back room. It had been Ray's sewing room. He'd never had the heart to clear it, and he'd never had the company to need it. 2 cots fit easily. He pulled blankets out of the cedar chest, the heavy gray ones from her aunt in Wyoming, and the little one buried her face in hers like she was trying to memorize the smell. "Bath?" he asked. "I can run a bath." The older girl shook her head. "Tomorrow, please." "All right, tomorrow." He gave them a candle and showed them how to blow it out. He showed them where the bathroom was and where the kitchen was and where he would be sleeping, which was the chair by the front door, with the rifle across his knees. He didn't say that part. They didn't ask. He pulled the door closed behind him. He sat in the chair. He didn't sleep. For an hour, maybe more, he just listened to the house. He heard the older one moving around in there for a while. He heard her speak softly in their language, like she was telling the little one something, maybe a story. He heard the bed springs settle. He heard one cough. He heard nothing for a long while. Then he heard crying. It was the older one, quiet into a pillow. The kind of crying you only did when you'd held it for a long time and finally found a place safe enough to put it down. Cole sat in the chair and listened to a 12-year-old purple-skinned girl in a back room of his house cry herself out, and he understood, for the first time in his life, what his mother had meant when she'd said sometimes the most important thing a person could do was stay in the next room and not say a word. He stayed in the chair. When the crying stopped, the house was quieter than it had been in 3 years. He fell asleep just before dawn. In the morning, he made eggs. He had 4. He used all 4. He fried bread in the fat. He set the table the way Ray had taught him to set it, fork on the left, knife on the right, even though both of them had grown up not knowing the difference. And she'd thought it was funny that the colony charter required them to know. The girls came out together, hand in hand. They had washed their faces. Their hair was still wild, but it had been finger-combed by someone who cared about it. Mira's was in two long ropes down her back. Naira's hung loose. They stood in the doorway and stared at the table, and stared at him, and the older one's eyes filled up. And Cole pretended he didn't notice, because that seemed to be what she would prefer. "Sit," he said. They sat. They ate slower this morning, not because they were less hungry, because they were beginning, in the way children begin to do these things, to trust that there would be a tomorrow. Cole drank his coffee. After a while, in pieces, the story came out. Their mother had been killed. Nira used the word killed, not died. It was important to her, Cole could tell, that he knew there was a difference. Their father had been killed before that. They had been on a ship. The ship was taking them and others somewhere safe, and the ship had been attacked. There had been a lifeboat. Their mother had put them in the lifeboat. She had not been in the lifeboat herself. The lifeboat had come down on Beren's Reach 2 weeks ago. There had been others in it. There were not others anymore. Naira did not explain that part, and Cole did not ask. She had walked her sister through 12 nights to get to a place where the smoke from a chimney looked steady. "That was here," she said. "That was me," Cole said. She nodded. Mira was eating bread very slowly with both hands. "How old are you?" Cole asked gently. "I am 12, Nira said. "She is 6. "Do you know where you were going?" She shook her head. "Are people looking for you?" Her eyes slid sideways, very fast. Then she looked back. "Yes," she said. "Good people?" She thought about it. "Some of them." Cole nodded. He didn't push. He poured her more juice, and the little one held her cup up to be filled, and Cole filled it. And the little one said, "Thank you," very carefully, like she had been practicing the word. And Naira smiled at her sister with such open relief in her face that Cole understood, then, that the older girl had not seen the little one smile in a long time, and that this stew, and this bread, and this kitchen had given her sister back to her. Cole looked down at his coffee. "You can stay here," he said, "as long as you want." Nira's eyes filled. She looked away. "Thank you," she said. They stayed 3 days. They were 3 days Cole would never quite be able to talk about. There was nothing in them, really. Mira followed him around the property holding the cloth. She gave it back to him when he stopped working, then took it again when he started, like it was a tool of his that she had been entrusted to carry. Nira read his books. He had 9 of them. She read 4. She asked him what an ocean was. He showed her a picture in one of Ray's old atlases, and Mira wanted to know if he had been in one. And he said he had, and Mira asked him if he would tell her about it that night, and he said he would. He did. He sat on the floor by their cots and told them about the Pacific, about how it sounded, about how the water tasted, about sand. Mira fell asleep with her hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers. Nira watched him tell the story with her eyes half closed and a small, careful smile, like she was filing every word away for some later use. On the 3rd afternoon, the ship came. Cole was on the porch when he heard it, a high, thin whine that wasn't local. He grabbed the rifle without thinking. Nira came out behind him, and her face went still in a way that he, by then, knew meant she had seen something familiar. "It's all right," she said. "You sure?" She nodded. "It is one of ours." The ship came down in the south field. It was small and old and wrong-looking, the kind of patched-together civilian craft that ran in the gray markets out by the edge of charted space. A side hatch opened, and a man stepped down. Tall, thin, purple-skinned, with white hair pulled back and a face Cole didn't trust on instinct until he saw the man see Naira and saw what happened to his eyes. The man dropped to one knee in the grass. He held both his hands open in front of him. He said something low in their language, and his voice broke on it. Nira walked toward him without running, very straight, the way a much older person would walk toward a meeting they had been waiting for. Mira ran. Mira ran the whole way, with both arms out, and the man caught her and put his face into her hair, and Cole watched, from the porch, 2 people meet who he understood, immediately had thought each other dead. He stayed on the porch. It wasn't his moment. After a while, Naira turned and walked back to him. She climbed the porch steps slowly. She stopped 1 step below him so she could look him in the face without tilting her head back. "His name is Talon," she said. "He is my mother's brother." "All right," He has been looking for us. For how long? Since the ship. Cole nodded. He says we have to leave now, she said. There is a place we can go. It is not safe to stay here longer. Other people will come. Bad people? Yes. Then go. She looked at him. You saved us, she said. I made you stew. You saved us. There was no argument that would land on her face. Cole had learned that about her in 3 days. He let it go. She reached into the front of her shirt and took something out. It was a small disc, the size of a coin, dark gray, with markings on it that he didn't recognize. She pressed it into his palm hard. She closed his fingers around it with both her hands. This was my mother, she said. Naira, I can't take this. You have to. Why? She looked at him very steadily. Because someday, someone of mine will see it, she said. And when they do, they will know who you are. She didn't cry when she said it. She said it like it was a piece of business. The way her mother had probably said it to her, the way it had been said in her family for a long time before there was a Cole. Okay, he said. Keep it safe. I will. Mira came up the steps. She didn't say anything. She put both her arms around Cole's left leg and held on for a long count. And Cole put his hand on her hair, and the dog Reno nosed at her elbow. And the little one let go and stepped back and said very softly, Goodbye, Cole. Goodbye, Mira. She walked down the steps. She held her uncle's hand. The three of them got back in the ship, and the hatch closed, and the ship lifted, and Cole stood on the porch with the disc in his hand until the sound was gone. The kitchen was very quiet. The cloth was on the kitchen table where Mira had left it, folded, perfectly square. He sat down. He cried for the first time in 3 years. It was for them. It was not only for them. 10 years went by. They went by the way years go on a frontier world, in small bad steps with a few good days mixed in. Cole did not, for a long time, tell anyone what had happened. He didn't put the disc on a shelf for visitors to ask about. He kept it in a tin box under the floorboard by his bed, with Ray's wedding ring and the one photograph he had of his parents and the bullet they'd taken out of his shoulder when he was 22. Some nights he would take it out and turn it over in his hands. He never figured out the markings. He wasn't sure he wanted to. The first year he kept thinking they would come back. He'd hear an engine and he'd be on the porch before he was fully awake. Once it was Waddle's pickup. Once it was a survey drone the colony had sent through after a quake. Once it was nothing at all, just his own want, manufacturing a sound for him to chase. By year 3, he stopped going out to the porch. By year 5, he had begun sometimes to wonder if any of it had been real. Beren's reach got worse. The pickup driver, Waddle, didn't come anymore. Waddle had been killed in the second drought year by a man who had wanted his truck more than Waddle had been able to give it up. The road service stopped after that. The grocery shipment dropped from monthly to seasonal. 2 of the 4 farms on the South Ridge were abandoned by the time Cole was 40. By the time he was 43, the colony charter had been quietly withdrawn, which meant nothing at first and then meant a lot, fast. There was no longer a marshal. There was no longer a clinic that answered emergencies. The town held a meeting and elected Mary Acuna as something they called a coordinator, but everyone knew what they really meant, which was someone to write the letters that no one was going to answer. Cole grew older. He grew thinner. He grew a beard he hadn't had before. He buried Reno under the cottonwood the same year he buried 2 neighbors. The neighbors he buried for raids. There were raiders in the hills now. They came down sometimes when there was something to take. The town had organized a watch. Cole was on it, twice a week, and he'd shot 2 men in the dark and lost no sleep over either one. Ray would not have recognized him. He told himself that sometimes. He kept the cottonwood watered. His wheat strip was smaller. His goats were down to 1. The chickens were gone. He had a horse now, an ugly bay with a chipped tooth that Mary had given him after her husband died. And the bay was named Lou, and Cole rode Lou into town twice a week to check on the people who couldn't check on themselves. There were 6 such people. 5 of them were women over 60. He was 46. His hair had gone gray at the temples. His hands had calloused into the shape of the tools he most often used. He had not, in 10 years, slept all the way through a single night. Sometimes, when he was very tired, he thought about a 6-year-old saying hello in his kitchen. Sometimes, when he was very, very tired, He thought he could remember the smile, but the smile was further away every year, and the memory was thinning, and he had begun to believe, by the 10th year, that probably they had not survived. Probably the bad people had caught up. Probably the small ship had not made it. Probably the disc in the tin box was the last thing of theirs that existed in the universe, and probably he was carrying it for two girls who had been dead for a long time. He told himself he was at peace with that. He told himself a lot of things. And then on a Tuesday in late summer, he was tightening a wire on the south paddock when the daylight changed. Lou tried to bolt. Cole had to wrap the lead around his wrist and hold the bay's head down with his other hand, talking nonsense into the horse's ear until the animal stopped trembling. The wind off the descent stripped the dust off the south paddock and threw it sideways across the road. And through the rolling brown haze, Cole could see windows lighting up in town, doors opening, his neighbors coming out into their yards in pieces, in nightshirts, holding rifles, holding nothing. He could hear Mary Acuna's voice before he could see her. "Cole! Cole, you out there?" "I'm here," he shouted back. She came running from the road, 62 years old and barefoot, with her gray hair flying and a shotgun in one hand. She skidded to a stop at his fence and grabbed the wire. "What is that?" she said. He looked at her. She'd lost weight in the last year. Her cheeks were pulled in. "I don't know. You're our watchman." "I'm not your watchman. I run a watch. That's a warship. That's not my job. You've seen off-worlders." "I've seen one off-worlder. Waddle. Waddle was from St. Louis." "Cole." He looked at her again. She was scared. He had not seen Mary Acuna scared in 8 years. The last time her husband had been bleeding out on the road, and she had still managed to run for the medical kit without crying. She was scared now. "All right," he said. He climbed onto Lou. "All right, Mary, I'll go look." "Don't go alone." "I'm not going alone. You're going to fetch every gun in town, and you're going to put them on the South Road, and you're going to keep them low. If I'm not back in an hour, you don't come looking. You take the people who can ride, and you ride east, and you don't stop." "Cole." "You don't stop, Mary." She nodded. He kicked the bay forward. The warship had landed in the dry creek a half-mile out of town, in a field that had once grown alfalfa and had not grown anything in 5 years. It had landed gently. The dust around it was already settling. Cole rode in slow, hat off, rifle in the saddle scabbard, where any censor worth its money would already have read it and decided whether or not to vaporize him. He kept Lou at a walk. He kept his hands in plain sight. He had been thinking the whole half-mile about how he wanted to die, and he had come to the conclusion that he wanted to die slow and sober, and that had nothing to do with the next 10 minutes. A ramp was already down. There were soldiers on the ramp. They were tall. Their armor was black, and the lines of it caught the late sun and threw the light back in ways that hurt his eyes. Their faces were uncovered. Every one of them had purple skin. Every one of them had white hair, cropped short. Every one of them had violet eyes. He felt something go very still in his chest. He stopped Lou. He swung down. He left the rifle in the scabbard. He walked the last 40 yards on foot into the long shadow of the ship, past two soldiers with weapons that were politely not pointed at him, into a half-circle of armored figures arranged at the foot of the ramp, like an honor guard who had not yet decided whether the man arriving deserved honor. He stopped. He took his hat off. A voice from behind the line said, "In clean standard, Cole Hadley." It was a woman's voice. It was almost familiar, the way a song was almost familiar when you'd heard it as a child and not since. The line parted. She came down the ramp. She was tall. He saw the tall before he saw anything else. Taller than him, taller than her own soldiers. She was wearing armor that was different from theirs, plainer at the shoulder, marked at the throat with something he couldn't read. Her hair was white and short and pushed back from her face. Her face. He saw her face, and the world went sideways. She had grown up. She was 22. He had last seen her on a porch step 10 years ago. He had bent down to look her in the eye then. He could not have reached her eye now without going on his toes. Her cheekbones had come in. Her mouth had set into a different shape. Something steadier, something that had given orders. Her eyes were the same exact violet, the same exact intelligence behind them. Naira, he said. His voice did something it had not done in 10 years. It cracked. Mr. Hadley, she said. She was not smiling, and that was the part that almost broke him. She was holding herself very, very straight, the way she had held herself the morning she'd said goodbye on the porch. She had been 12 then. She had been holding herself together the same way now, and Cole understood then that she had been afraid he would not be alive. She came to a stop one step from him. She lowered her head. Just slightly. It is an honor, she said, to find you standing. He couldn't speak. He held his hat in both hands. Nira, he said again. Behind her on the ramp, a smaller figure stepped out of the line. She was 16. She had Mira's face. She had grown into the face that had been promised, in the lavender eyes and the small cautious mouth, on a 6-year-old in his kitchen 10 years ago. She came down the ramp with the careful attention of someone who had been told to wait until the right moment and was now at the right moment. She walked past 2 of her sister soldiers. She walked up to Cole. She looked at him. She said very quietly exactly the way she had said it in his kitchen. "Hello." Cole made a sound he didn't have a name for. He went down to one knee in the dust. Mira put both her arms around his neck. The 16-year-old fleet ensign, in front of 200 armored soldiers, and her sister the captain, in a sky full of warship, held an old human stranger against her shoulder while he shook, and she did not let go for a long time. It took him a few minutes to be all right. Mira stayed with him through it. She didn't say anything. She held his hand on the way back to her sister, and Cole noticed, distantly, that her hand was almost the same size as his now, and that this was something he had not been ready for. When he was standing again, Naira waited for him. "There is a great deal to tell you," she said. "I want to do it on your land, not here." "All right. May we come?" The question almost made him laugh. He swallowed it. "It's still your room, Naira." She closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then she opened them, and she nodded once, and turned and gave a string of orders to her line. Half the soldiers stayed with the ship. Half came with them. They moved down the dust road in a slow procession, the warship behind them like a held breath. The town up ahead frozen on its porches as a man on a bay horse rode in the company of 2 purple-skinned officers and a column of armored soldiers, none of whom were pointing weapons. Mary Acuna met them at the edge of town with the shotgun lowered. "Cole." "It's all right, Mary." "You sure?" He looked at Nira. She had stopped, out of respect, 2 paces behind him. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." Mary stepped aside. The procession passed. By the time they got to his porch, half of Beren's reach was following them at a respectful distance. Cole brought Naira and Mira inside. The rest waited on the porch. Naira's officers, with a discipline Cole had not seen since his uncle's stories about the Marines, arranged themselves into a loose perimeter that did not block any of his neighbors' sight lines, and put away the visible weapons and stood at parade rest in the dust. Cole closed the front door. He looked at his kitchen. The kitchen looked smaller than it had 10 years ago. The brass kettle was still there. The plate above the stove was still there. The crooked cabinet was still there. He put water on. He pulled out 3 cups. His hands were not entirely steady, and Naira very quietly took the 3rd cup from him and set it down for him. She made the tea. He sat at the table. So did Mira. Mira was looking at the bird plate on the wall with her lower lip caught a little under her teeth, and Cole understood, slow, that she remembered it. She remembered the room. Naira set the cups down. She sat across from him. "I will tell you everything," she said, "but first I must say one thing." "All right. You believed we were dead." He looked at her. "Yes. You were wrong. I see that. My sister and I have been alive for 10 years, she said, because of 3 days, and a kitchen, and a man who made stew for 2 children he did not know. Nira, I am going to tell you the whole story now, Mr. Hadley. I want you to know what you did. You will not like all of it, but you will hear it," she told him. His name was not the only one in her mother's last instruction. There had been others. There had been 6 lifeboats. The other 5 had been intercepted before they made the surface, by the people who had killed her father and her mother and most of her line. The lifeboat that came down in the dust outside Beren's reach had been the only one to land. There had been 4 other people in it. 2 had died in the landing. 2 had died in the first week of the walk. Nira had walked 12 nights with her sister on her back for the last 3 of them. She had been told before they left the ship what to do if she found a kindness. Her mother had told her, in the lifeboat, what the disc was for. It was a sigil. Not a sigil of rank, but of debt. Among her people, there was a very old practice that predated their wars, predated their fleet, predated even the long peace they'd had before everything broke. If a member of their house was given shelter by a stranger in a dark time, the head of that house could give a sigil, not as payment, as a binding. The receiver of the sigil was, from that day, written into their family. He was kin. He had been kin for 10 years. "I didn't know that," Cole said. "I know. You said someone of yours would see it." "Yes." "Who's seen it?" "No one yet," she said. "But I will see it now if you have it." He stood up. He went into the bedroom. He came back with the tin box and set it on the kitchen table. He opened it. He took out the disc. It was the same, smaller in his memory than it actually was. He had not looked at it in 3 years. He set it on the table. Nira picked it up. She looked at it for a long moment. She turned it over once. Then she did something he did not expect. She took the chain from around her own neck. There was a disc on it, the same shape, the same dark gray, the same markings. She set her disc next to his. The markings on hers and the markings on his were halves of the same pattern. He hadn't known there could be a half. He hadn't known there was a pattern. Mira reached across the table. She put her own disc from her own chain next to his and her sister's. The 3 of them, side by side, made a complete shape. "This is my house," Nira said quietly. "This is what is left of it. My sister and me and you." Cole could not get a breath in. "There were 4, she went on. Our mother had one. It went down with her ship. So 3 is what there is. 3 is what there will be until either I have a daughter or my sister does." "Nira, you are written into our family, Mr. Hadley. You have been for 10 years. It was not a thing you had to consent to. It was a thing my mother did, through me, in a lifeboat. I am telling you now because it is right that you know." Mira slid the discs back to their owners. She gave Cole his. He took it in both hands. He sat there for a long time, with 2 purple-skinned women in his kitchen and the sun moving across the bird plate and the brass kettle ticking as it cooled, and the wind starting up the way it did in the late afternoon in Beren's Reach. And he understood finally what he had done. He had made stew. That was all. That was everything. He had questions. He didn't know which one to ask first. Nira waited. She had been ready for this part of the conversation, he realized, for years. "How did you find me?" he said, because it was the easiest one. "My mother left a record before the ship was attacked," Nira said. "She named the system the lifeboats were aimed at. She named Beren's Reach as the most likely planet. She named your township by its colony tag. She did not, of course, know your name, but she knew the township. It took us 6 years to build a fleet, then a year to win back the corridor between our space and yours, then 3 more years to find this town. A frontier world has many records that do not get out to anyone. You came here yourself." "Yes. You command a warship. I command 3, she said. "This one is my flagship." "And you came yourself." She looked at him. "Yes. There was no one you could send." "There was no one," she said carefully. "I would let go in my place." He nodded. He looked at his cup. "Mira," he said. The girl looked up. "I'm sorry it took us so long," he said. She made a sound and pushed back from the table and came around it and put her arms around his shoulders. She held on hard. He felt her shake once. Then she got herself together. She was 16. She was someone's officer in training. She had control. She put her cheek down on the top of his head, the way Nira had held her 10 years ago in the lifeboat. Then she straightened. "It is all right," she said very steadily, into the kitchen. "We have him now." Nira smiled for the first time. It was a small one. It was tired. It was the smile of a captain who had not let herself smile in front of her crew for a long time. She let it stay briefly on her mouth, and then she put it away, and Cole had the strange thought that he had, in his life, only ever made two people smile that way. One of them had been Ray. The other one was now sitting across his table with 3 warships in orbit. "There is something else," Nira said. "There always is. I would like you to come with us." He had been ready for that. He had been ready in some way since the moment he had recognized her. "Where?" he asked. "To my house, to our home. We have a place ready for you. We have been keeping it ready. You would have, by our laws and our custom, the standing of a senior in our line. You would not be a guest. You would not be a project. You would be family. You would never want again." He looked at her. "You know you don't have to," he said quietly. "It is not a have to." "All right." He looked at his cup. He looked at the bird plate. He looked at the window over the sink, where, 10 years ago, he had seen a 6-year-old purple-skinned girl sitting on the steps in the morning sun, watching Reno chase a lizard. He looked at his hands. The calluses had stopped being his calluses years ago. They had become the calluses of the work he did. The work was watching over 6 women over 60 in a town that did not have a marshal anymore. The work was patching a barn door. The work was burying his neighbors. The work was riding into the dark twice a week to look for raiders so that Mary Acuna could sleep. He thought about Ray under the cottonwood. He thought about how much he wanted to lay down. How much he wanted, after 10 years, to be done with the cold and the dust and the sound of an engine in the night that always, always stopped being the engine he was waiting for. He took a breath. "No," he said. Nira's face did not change. It was a captain's face. But behind it, somewhere, he saw something settle, the way a person settles who had thought, going in, that this was what the answer would be. "I want something else," he said. "Tell me." "This town." "Yes." "You see it?" "I have seen it." "It's dying, Nira." "I know. There are 6 women here that the colony has stopped sending grain to. There are raiders in the hills who will pick this place apart in another year. There's nobody coming. There hasn't been anybody coming for a long time. I'm not the only one who needs a way out. I'm just one of the ones who happens to know your face." Nira was watching him very closely. "What are you asking, Mr. Hadley?" "I'm asking you to help them." "In what way?" "Whatever way you would help me. If your law says I'm family, then they're my neighbors, and I'm asking for them. Make it safe. Make the roads safe. Get the grain shipments back. Run the raiders off, or scare them off, or whatever it is your soldiers do. You can do it. I saw your line on the ramp. I know you can do it." "Yes," she said, "I can do it." "Then do that. And you?" "I'll stay." She nodded slowly. "You are sure?" "I'm sure." "You understand what you are turning down?" "I do." "You understand you are turning it down for 62-year-old strangers." "Mary Acuna was the woman who ran for a medical kit while her husband was bleeding out in the road," Cole said. "She didn't know him 5 years before that. He was a stranger she'd married late. She ran for the kid anyway. There aren't strangers, Nira. There are just people you haven't fed yet." Nira was quiet for a long time. Mira was watching her sister. Nira finally did something Cole had not expected. She put both her hands palm down on his kitchen table, and she lowered her head, the way she had on the dust road. Then she straightened, and she said in a voice that was not, for that moment, a captain's voice, "You are who my mother thought you would be." Cole had to look away. "All right," she said, Captain again. "It is done." Just like that. Just like that. She stood. She crossed to the window. She raised her hand and made a single gesture, sharp, downward, that one of her officers on the porch saw and acknowledged with a small bow of his head. Then Nira came back and sat down. Nothing else seemed to have changed. Cole looked out the window. The officer was already speaking into a small device on his collar. Within a minute, 3 of the perimeter soldiers had broken away and were walking, calmly, toward the edge of town, in the direction of the South Road. Within an hour, Cole would learn 2 assault carriers were already detaching from the warship overhead, and a survey team was already mapping the township grid, and a relief shipment that had been pre-staged on Nira's flagship was already being prepared for offload. She had, he understood slowly, brought all of that with her. She had not known when she came down whether he would be alive, but she had brought enough, regardless, to take care of whatever and whoever she found, because that was the kind of officer her mother had taught her to be, and he had 10 years ago, by accident and by habit and by the instinct of a man who had once lost everything and could not bear to see two children lose more, helped raise her into it. They sat in the kitchen for a long while. Mira found the cloth, the same cloth. It had been on a hook by the sink for 10 years, and Cole had used it nearly every day, and it was thin now and patched. But it was the same cloth. She held it up. "You kept it," she said. He looked at it. "I kept everything." The sun moved across the floor. Naira, after a while, got up and went out to talk to her officers. She left her tea half drunk, the way she'd left her stew the first night, and Cole understood that she had already decided to come back to it later. Mira stayed. She sat across from Cole and asked him, finally, the question Cole had been wondering since the ramp. "What did you do?" she said. "For 10 years? He thought about it. "Same thing you did," he said. "What's that?" "Stayed alive." She nodded. She looked at the bird plate. "My mother was named Sela," she said. "All right. I do not remember her. I'm sorry. Do you remember your wife?" He thought about that too. "Yes." "What was she like?" "She was the kind of person," he said, "who would have set this table herself." Mira nodded. Outside, the sound of the warship's engines had gone soft. Someone in town was shouting something, but it was a happy shout. The kind of shout people did when relief came that they hadn't believed in. Cole could hear, somewhere, a child laughing. He had not heard a child laugh in this town in maybe 2 years. Mira stood up. She pulled the chain from around her own neck. She held a small dark disc in her palm. She set it on the kitchen table next to his. "This is my own," she said. "Not the house's. Mine. I made it." He looked at it. It was the same shape. It was different in tiny ways. It was made by a girl who had grown up in a hard family on a hard world, with a kind of precision he had not known 16-year-olds could have. "For me?" he said. "Yes." He took it. He held it for a long time. When Nira came back in, she had her professional face on, but her eyes were a little wet at the corners, and Cole did not draw attention to it, the way she had not drawn attention to his. "They are stunned," she said. "The town. They'll come around. I have officers who will stay. A small detail. They will protect the township, and they will not interfere. Mary Acuna has already, I have to tell you, told one of my majors that she will be running the welcome arrangements herself." "That sounds like Mary." "She is going to make us tea," Naira said. Cole almost laughed. "Sit down," he said. "Stay another hour." Naira sat. She drank her cold tea. Mira pulled her chair closer to Cole's. Naira told him about her ship and her crew and the war that was almost over and the long road home that was finally beginning to feel like a road. Mira told him about her studies. She wanted to be a healer. She wanted to come back to Beren's Reach, she said carefully, in a few years after she finished. She wanted to learn how the human medicine worked, the kind he had stitched her sister's arm with that first night. He had forgotten he had stitched her sister's arm. Naira had a small white scar on the inside of her left wrist. She showed it to him. He didn't remember sewing it. He remembered the needle. He remembered the thread. He didn't remember the cut. There had been so many small, ordinary things that he had done in those 3 days that had become the whole map of who they had grown into. When the sun was on the cottonwood, all 3 of them went outside. The town was alive in a way it had not been in years. Soldiers were carrying crates. 2 of the older women were directing them where to put things. Mary Acuna was standing on the porch of the church with her shotgun broken open over her arm, laughing about something with a young officer who looked like he was learning a language in real time. The bay horse, Lou, was in the yard with his head down in a feed bag the size of his chest, eating something Cole did not have at home and had not had at home for a long time. Cole stood between Naira and Mira. He had a disc in each hand. The sky above Beren's Reach was full of warship and full of light and full of dust, and beneath it, very small, a town of about 70 people was, that evening, learning something it had not known about the universe, which was that sometimes 10 years ago, on a quiet night, a man with nothing left had given 2 strangers a bowl of stew, and the universe, in its slow and unfair way, had remembered, and the universe, in its slow and unfair way, had come back. Cole closed his hands around the discs. "Thank you for the meal," Nira said beside him, very quietly. "Both of them." "Both of them?" "The first one, and the one I will eat at your table tonight." He looked at her. She was smiling again. "All right, Captain," he said. "Cole." "Yeah. Don't call me that. What should I call you?" She looked at him. The wind moved her white hair across her cheek, the way it had moved Mira's hair 10 years ago in his kitchen. "Anything you would call family," she said. He nodded. He stood with the two purple-skinned women he had once fed. The cottonwood moved, gentle, in the late wind. The town learned to laugh again, slowly behind them. The warship hung in the sky like a quiet promise. And Cole Hadley, who had spent 10 years thinking he had done nothing of consequence in his life, finally understood what kindness was. Kindness was the only thing the universe ever bothered to remember. Everything else it forgot.